All right, welcome back to another episode of On Location. Today we've got a really cool friend and also somebody who's one of the biggers in the industry, Evan Reinstein. Evan has been around, has been kind of like me. He's been on all sides of these industries, which is a perfect person to have this conversation with. So, Evan, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Joe. Appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, no problems, no problem. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about. You have a whole music career that you've been a recording engineer, and that's been awesome, and we're going to have a little bit of chat about that. You transitioned into television, where you're known as an A1. Why everybody changes names for everything, I don't know. Literally the same gig, except a whole lot easier because you don't have 48 channels to be worrying about. So what really intrigued me was 2020. And I'm not talking about the pandemic, because it is what it was. But as we all know, and this is a long setup for you, as we all know, this industry just went flatlined. Mm-hmm. I had been in it too many years to even discuss, but we're talking decades, and I had never, ever, ever, ever experienced anything that went from no weddings, you can't even be in a wedding band, to no broadcast, no anything. Concerts, everything, stop. Broadway, stop. Mm-hmm. So there was no place to really turn to work. But you found a group of people that were clever enough to figure out, hey, listen, television's got to go on the air. People still need to do this. And you guys grabbed technology from the gaming industry and kind of kludged a bunch of stuff together to make this literally individually remote control room. Okay, now that I'm done setting this whole thing up, tell me a little bit about the evolution of how that happened and what it takes to do that.
Well, the long setup is warranted because it's a lot that went on in a short period of time. But I was not involved with any streaming, any gaming productions prior to the pandemic. But it was a very quick turnaround from studio setup into all at home, get all this gear, learn new programs, and take the basic principles of audio and try to kind of, I don't want to say dumb it down, but you have less functionality through a lot of these programs. Oh yeah. I mean, compared to like a console and, your patch bays and your digital routers, it's a lot less. So that was one of the first hardest humps to get over, was how do we take this complicated production and then simplify it down into something that a few guys on a crew can do at home.
Listen to what you just said. You're taking literally $1 million control rooms, $1 million system networks, and you're working from your kitchen table. Yep. And everybody is. Yep. And somehow you're using technology that didn't exist. It wasn't like you had to walk in and learn this. You guys had to literally invent this and then start sorting out what worked, what didn't work, how can this get better. And the whole thing just fascinated me. So walk me through what you evolved in the beginning and then how you kept refining that.
Okay, so first it was churches and video games. And that's where the basic principles of these streamings came from. And so I'll play some video games sometimes, but I'm not a big streamer, so I didn't even really see a lot of these Twitch streams and the Discord stuff going on before the pandemic. But so we were able to take a program called vMix, right, which is mainly, I think a lot of churches used it based on the tutorials that I had to watch in my personal time to learn how to do all these things, and then people who streamed their own stuff for video games. So it was a lot of gear that I had to get. I had a laptop, I had an interface and the basics, but I had to I have an iPad, a PC, a Mac, and another Mac, and that's my setup. And I have an outboard mixer as well, which is a Behringer controller that we had to program to be able to link up to functions in vMix. And with that, I had to learn how to script things, which I didn't know how to do. So that's another IT kind of centric thing. So that's a good point. It's a lot of IT stuff that you would think is the
Right.
cusp of the IT world that you have to learn in order to be able to do this stuff from home. And I think a lot of people didn't want the secret getting out that there was capabilities like this, that you didn't have to go into the $1 million studio, which you still do for the bigger shows. But right now, you know, the groundwork's being laid out, and we're really starting to improve on a lot of the streaming stuff we're capable of doing from home.
And you brought up a great point. Like I said, I've been in this industry forever. So I've actually seen technology come and change the direction of what we're doing. Speaking of technology, I'm about to turn my phone off. First thing I usually tell everybody. So technology, I've watched it come. I've watched it, you know, go from analog to digital. I've watched recording go from 2-inch tape to an SD card, you know, people cutting tracks on the subway on their laptop. So I've seen it evolve, but you can usually project and you can usually prepare and get ready to make those moves. The IP was coming. You know, I play a lot in the real tech, deep tech world. And there was conversations. Integrators talk about, you know, we're going to IP, we're doing this, we're doing that. So I knew it was coming, but I knew it was coming in 10 years.
Yeah.
And I knew it would go piece by piece by piece. And by the time the operators had to get in, all this stuff would have been in micros. You would have never been scripting. You know, as an A1, you would have never had to go down and start coding. And let me qualify what scripting means. That's down into the code. I mean, you're writing code to make shit happen. A1s, operators, directors, the TDs, that's not your game. You don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. But you did. You had to learn that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of pre-scripted things, a very limited amount, and I was fortunate enough to find some of these things. But the way those come about is a team of guys who essentially only script are building these for the operators. So traditionally, as you said, you would be an operator. You would deal with, you know, in the studio things like routing and, you know, assigning different signals in different places, but you're not necessarily scripting the gear. But now I've learned how to assign functions on a more rudimentary level, which is really good because it gives me a deeper understanding of what I'm actually doing.
Yeah, that's invaluable. And it's hard for me to tell people how important understanding the derivative of the technology and the depth of technology, because you're never caught off guard. If you understand it at that level, they can throw anything at you, obviously, and you can adapt to it. But if you don't have that technical aptitude, it's hard to be, you know, evaluate or had to grow as an operator, which you shined at. And I'm going to go back to, you know, giving you the accolades and the props of going from being a recording engineer and coming up comparatively newbie. I mean, you stepped in not that long ago, you know, and became a recording engineer and grew quickly, got a handle on that. And then when you went into television, it's the same, but it's very different. And you adapt it to that rather quickly. So that tells me you have a sense of, you have a good aptitude for thinking things through. And I've worked with you enough times that I see you think. You know, you stop and very methodically go, okay, wait a second. If this is that, then this should be that. So that means I have to find that. And you piece that together brilliantly. One of the other things that we all overlook pretty quickly is comms. So you talked about, bringing the game together, bringing the show together remotely, but you also have to have comms. You have to talk to everybody in everybody else's kitchen.
Right, right.
So talk a little bit about how that got pulled in.
Well, the comms thing is interesting. I've used a few different types of comms. So I did some work with EA Sports. We did a FIFA tournament. I came and kind of filled in there. And we would use Discord a lot. In some of the private shows we did, we use Unity Intercom, which is my favorite to use right now because their support's great, which is, I can't stress enough that support from the developers is such a huge part of this because we're only as good as we are until we're not. And when we're
Great quote. Hold on.
Well, I mean that's some Joe stuff too, because I can hear you saying that, but
You
it's the
will
truth.
now.
But it's the truth. I mean, when you have a problem that, you got 3 or 4 guys who are all doing this and all have their heads in if-then kind of thought processes, and you get stumped, you need help from the developers, because it's a lot of times it'll be a bug on their end. And we worked with Grass Valley a lot too. And the Grass Valley guys were extremely diligent about taking notes, being available, because you could see them continuing to develop their product as it went along. But as for comms, sorry for my long-winded answer here.
No, keep going.
So for comms, Unity Intercom has been the most popular way for us to do it. And that gives us the ability to just sit here and program comms just like it would be in an RTS. We can inject feeds in and monitor program in low latency off of Unity. And that's actually better in a lot of cases than having direct conversations through whatever platform we're using, just because of the delay times. And I think that people rely on the comms heavily because people need to talk to each other, and that's a given. But yeah. I mean, when your comms goes out, that's one of the worst moments that you can have. And
there is. I don't think there is any worse.
No,
other than if you're directing and your multi-viewer goes out.
Yeah. So
if you can't hear each other and don't know what's going on, I mean, and for those of you who are listening, who are watching, who don't really know the nuances of a control room, I liken it to Transformers. We're all these individual pieces, and then all of a sudden, when it comes time to do the show, we all come together and build this other super thing. If they all don't work together, the audio guy, the technical guy, the director, the lighting guy, all these things have to piece together and function like a front line in football. I mean, there's so many analogies that a band on stage. If you're
I like the Transformers. I like the Transformers analogy, because if Optimus Prime is a truck and Optimus Prime needs to transform into his humanoid form to fight, you don't see him staying having a truck head, because that's not going to do him too good. So if one piece doesn't transform with Optimus, it's not going to work out too well. But that's it. So we'll have I'll do some work with CBS. We use RTS, and I use it off my iPad. And there's been a lot of dropouts on RTS, and you'll see someone's name there lit up to show that they're on, and then one next second they're off, and You're trying to roll a video, and the EVS operator is not on comms to know that, so it screws the show a little bit, when that happens.
Yeah, let me back up a little bit here about the technology. So here's and it's unique. Again, I've been 30 years. This is a unique point in history that never existed before, because you mentioned Grass Valley, you mentioned RTS. These are companies that have evolved in the broadcast industry in an environment that everybody understood, and they knew how to interface in those environments. Then there's this streaming, then there's this gaming, then there's the Twitches, then there's all these other things that don't know anything about how television works, or how any major technical system works in broadcast. So the people who are used to being in a studio couldn't make that transition over to virtual efficiently, because they were trying to kludge their gear. Imagine you have a really small bungalow and you're trying to expand it, and you keep kludging. It's never going to work or look right. And then you have the other side, who the people you were talking to don't know what broadcast people need. So they're leaning on you to explain to them, but they are building or trying to build stuff for you that they don't even know why.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and a lot of times, that side of it, the developing side, is adapting with the operators simultaneously. Right. Because without people out there using their gear, they're not gonna know. That's it. And they could take their best guess. You could read a book, Broadcasting 101 and everything, but until you get into those real life situations of what's practical and what's not, you're not gonna know. And there's and like you said, like there's some people trying to take the studio gear that already exists and the programs that are already used in the control room physically and transition that into IP targeting. Then there's the other half that's taking the nuances, the newer nuances of these things, and trying to shift them into, I guess, evolve them would be better, to grow them into broadcast scenarios. So like I have this Behringer board here. I'll hold it up for you. I got a little visual. Just pop it off my stand. So this is the board that I use. It's a controller. So this does not actually really pass audio. You're just hooking this thing up to whatever IP you're using for your show. And it has automated faders, and you're responsible as the operator for linking every function, every button, anything that you need. And that's really good. But prior to this broadcasting scenario, you know, something like that couldn't have been done because
Right.
there wasn't a platform that existed to be able to program these commands and send them into that.
Right. And there's two evolutions that happened simultaneously. You know, you had digital controllers, which evolved in the music world and the recording world via MIDI, where it didn't, as you said, doesn't really pass anything. You know, MIDI doesn't actually move anything. It just opens gates. It's an automatic gate opener, and it's an automatic, how far is the gate going to open, which would be faders. So, but in traditional worlds, in your engineering, your music engineering world, you're actually moving signal through those boards. And you're controlling amplitude and color and switches and all routings. So again, if you don't get that mindset, you're screwed.
And
Because
the
if you're
question
trying to
comes up-
set this thing up on your kitchen table, you're going to be looking for the audio jacks.
Right. That's the thing. Like you start to wonder, where is my audio physically? like what is actually happening? So I mean, you get these digital, you know, callers, we'll call them. Like, so if you're using vMix, somebody can call in. Where does the audio actually come through? That audio is digitally sent to the program, and your controller is only controlling parameters of the program, and you never actually get audio physically through any of your gear.
I think Faro City is going to need a course from you, written, talking about this, because no matter how deep we try to explain it, it's not making any sense to anybody who doesn't know. Because in 2019, you didn't know.
No, I didn't know. I knew about controllers. Like I had used like MIDI controllers and stuff in the studio, which was nice. But I always would have taken an analog board over a MIDI board in the studio. There you go.
That's mine.
No, that's nice.
People freak out on me all the time. They're like, I don't understand. You're like Mr. Tech. And anytime we see a shot in your studio, you've got an analog board behind you. I said, I grew up that way. I need to touch things. I need to feel things. It literally is how my brain works.
You like to get the quality of the board. I think at the end of the day, the preamps and the channel paths of an analog board are always going to give you a unique mix. And that's for music mostly, right? Because you're not looking for that color coming off the gear in broadcast. And, you know, that's another thing, is that when the signal's coming down the line and, you know, a participant of a show might not have a USB microphone or a real microphone like this going through an interface, and they just might be using their laptop. So you got to work with the people on the other end, the participants, the contributors, the hosts, whoever it is, and you got to make sure that their stuff can even be compatible with your stuff. And a lot of times it doesn't sound good because their internet could be slow. That's another thing. Like, slow internet will affect the sound of the audio. And if they're, you know, they have like a 5 upload speed, you're going to get a not so great sounding signal anyways, but you just got to roll with it sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, that 2020 was good and bad for our industry, because it was obviously bad because none of us had work, but it was good for the bean counters because they realized, oh, one, we can sell a shitty product and people will still buy it. And two, we don't need all this space. We don't need these $1 million facilities. We don't need all these operators. We can do a lot of this stuff. So I'm very curious to see how that evolution battles itself as we move forward. I want to drop this subject for real quick because we're running out of time. I want to talk to you about the nuanced differences between music engineering and being in that environment versus being in a television A1 recording booth and those kinds of things. Give us a little comparison of what your interpretation of those are.
Okay, so one of the hardest things, I guess, to get used to coming into the TV industry a few years ago was with you, Joe, and I would bring up to you when stuff didn't sound the way I wanted it to sound. And I was very adamant about it, and you were just like, you got to just relax a little bit. I'm like, okay, all right. Because I'm listening critically. I'm thinking like, all right, I hear like a 1K buzz coming out of the light in the grid over there, and I bet you
God bless you. You're supposed to.
Yeah, man. But like, sometimes you're not going to hear that on the air because of the way that it's compressed out, even through master. Like, so what you're hearing is not always what's going to be heard on air. It's going to be close, but it's not going to always be exact. And people through their TVs aren't going to hear little tiny things like that. Whereas in a music track, when I put the headphones on and I'm jamming out or I'm at the gym or whatever it is, like I can hear it and I hate it and it bothers me and it makes my skin crawl and I'm like, eh. But for TV, you got to be a little less particular about it.
Yeah, and that's not saying, and I obviously you and I crossed paths in the beginning this way, and I come from your world. I mean, I've been audio engineer probably longer than I've been in television, maybe the same at this point. And so critical listening is it for us. I mean, we have to learn and train ourselves to be critically listening. The difference in television, their environments aren't built for that. They're not built acoustically in great depths, not like a recording studio. So even their interfaces aren't the same. Their consoles aren't the same. So you don't have all the toys. You don't have all the environments from one to the other because audio's always been the stepchild in broadcast. I started out when I transitioned over, I was literally called an audio puke. That was the nickname for audio guys.
Why
I was
a puke?
F you. I said, I come from a world where I'm a god, and now I'm an audio puke?
Why a puke? What's a puke? Man, that's an insult, man.
Ooh, it was.
Oof, that stings.
But, and then as I fought my way to the top, and so did I started bringing in a lot of engineers from the other world because I found out, I said, wait a second, we're working on, doing 16-hour days in a recording studio with a guy tracking the same thing over and over and thinking and listening the way you said, when you can, and you got, a console that's yay big, when you can walk into a television studio and you got 4 audio mics, 1 music track, and that's it. And the director telling you when to actually do that. And I said, and you get paid triple what you would in the recording industry.
Yeah. No,
So,
I think it's that the broadcast side of it is more big picture. Like I always have to keep the show in mind from start to finish. Like, how is this going to play out? How is it going to be even? Like, I need to make sure that the levels are consistent. And in the music world, you're thinking about the minute details. And when that guy does 100 takes of the same thing in a 16-hour period, you are noticing every difference about it. And when it comes to TV, there's also I don't want to say less routing, but you're just changing things less frequently because you're not experimenting. Because in the music world, you're like, what sounds the best? Maybe this guitar will sound great through this, this LA2A, or like maybe I should keep it clean and then compress it afterwards, or there's things like that going on. But in the TV scenario, you got to have your chain ready, and then you're going from, especially in live. I mean, no one's waiting for you, and even in tape, no one's waiting for you really. Like you have a very small amount of time comparatively to get everything ready to the point where you want it to be.
Right, and then you get held accountable when you decide, you know what, they don't like when I interrupt and stop a shoot because something sounds wrong. But then the next day, somebody come back, and the position that I'm in is kind of the liaison between the tech crew and the back row, and they'll come up to me, oh, how did this happen? How come you didn't? I said, because if we had stopped it, you would have flipped out because you got talent, thousands of dollars worth of talent sitting out there. You got all this stuff going on. And typically you let this go. For some reason you decided not this time.
It's time. It's always time. It's always
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
and also in the music world, it might be like, so I have a music studio. It would be, my engineer, and then I would be there, and, maybe one other guy. And we would all kind of be like, sounds good. Maybe try this, whatever. Okay, I'll try that. But in the TV world, and in the music scenario, that's hitting the multi-track, right away. So it's from you to the multi-track. And in the TV world, you have much more gain stages that you don't even have control over necessarily. So like if I'm feeding a mixer output to a mult box, and then that mult box is going to a camera, and that camera is going to an EVS machine, and that EVS machine is going to the board where the operator is sitting, that's board, mult box, camera, EVS, other board. 5 gain stages. 5 gain stages, and only 2 of them I have control over.
Right. And in those gain stages, you have another critical component that everybody is also paying attention to is the video.
Yes.
And they don't know how, most people can't do what we do, which is hear and see at the same time. That's just a difficult thing. I want to sum this up with one point, and again, both of us lived in both worlds. Personally, the music world, engineering on that side and teching on that side, is creative to me. Mm-hmm. It has a very vibing community, creative, all together doing this. Television, we're kind of removed, and I'm even on that development creative side, but it just doesn't feel the same, correct?
Yes, and I mean, you know why. I think it's not hard to know why. It's just because there's a lot of money and a lot of different heads on the production, and at the end of the day, if you're hired as crew, you're expected to fulfill the demands of whoever hired you, and your creative input is not always asked for. And it's not always something that is creative necessarily. If I don't want to discredit it, but I would say that the music is much more creative than the TV side.
Yeah, and you pointed it out beautifully when you said, let's try putting it through this. How's that drum going to sound? Let's take the drum and delay it by this and add that to that, and then roll something on top of that, and try it. Oh, no, it sounds like shit. Okay, let's take. You have that. I mean, you're involved in that. You're part of that thought process, that creative thought process. You don't have that in television.
Right. Well, I mean, I want the finished product at the end of the day that comes out of the studio to be something that has its own personality, to be something that's not just your run-of-the-mill, everyday sound. I want it to sound good. But the TV side, it's time. It's just there's not enough time to go in there and experiment unless you're getting paid out to be on a build day or a couple build days where you're really going through the gear and testing every single thing, which is not very common.
Yeah. Yep. Dude, thanks. I appreciate the time. One last question as we leave, which is I try to close with the same thing so that newbies coming in have some idea. What do you recommend? How would you tell somebody to get to be Evan? How do you work that?
Do you want to be Evan?
I don't.
Well, that's the first question. No, but if you are thinking about pursuing this type of venture, especially in audio, the first and most important thing is to stay involved. Before you even know anybody, before I met Joe, I was still doing a lot of things. Well, I wasn't getting paid for many of them, but I was doing a lot. And I had to make sacrifices when I was younger where I was, traveling around the country and sleeping on the floor every night and, on tour with people, which was cool, but also really sucked. And so if it feels like it really sucks, that might mean that you're doing the right thing. But everybody's got to put their time into it so that you come out a little harder, you come out more knowledgeable, and you come out more willing and ready to work because you felt what it's like to have a not so great circumstance in your work. And then it's knowing people and just being open to talk to people, being available. And, if somebody emails you, get back to it quickly, just simple things like that. Don't be afraid to reach out and call somebody. If you don't know something, you got to admit that you don't know it so that you can learn it in the future. And, it's generally just that type of attitude towards it and putting yourself in the right positions and knowing the right people. And as Faro City was built to be a community, that is the most important part to me, is being involved in the community and knowing people.
Thank you. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All great words. All right, buddy, I'm going to have you back a bunch of times because as things keep rolling up, you're great.
Awesome.
And I wasn't kidding about getting a course together. You articulate a lot of that stuff really well, and it's of great value. So we'll talk about that on the other side.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was great.
All right, cuz. I'll see you Sunday.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Later.